Hello there, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome back to Team Fortress 2. Today we are going to be playing a couple of matches on CP5 Gorge as the Pyromaniac, using the Degreaser, the shotgun, and the extinguisher. But a little later on I switched the shotgun out for the flare gun, because the shotgun has many ambiguous uses and is no doubt a very powerful weapon for the Pyromaniac, which a lot of people forget about. But the number one thing you need to realize about playing random pubs is that using the shotgun against pyros who are exclusively using their flamethrower is not a good idea. It's kind of like two pyros going at it in the wild, and one of them is trying to prove who is the alpha male on the server, and that typically boils down to just seeing who can outlast the other one, with both of them using the flamethrower against each other. And that guy proved to be the alpha male on the server, so I'd better back off and maybe try using his strategy in order to kill him in the future. So, let's actually talk a little bit about the matches which I'm showing off in this video. It's a little bit long. I'm showing off two matches and a couple of clips in between because we had like two team scrambles at some point or another. But this server, it was as if I was fighting against players who had never encountered a pyro who knew how to air blast before. It felt like all of the soldiers were throwing tennis balls at me, and I even encountered a couple of more different projectiles, such as like a medic with the crossbow, a sniper with the huntsman, an NG with the rescue ranger going super aggressive. It was all just a little bit insane, and I really felt obligated to show this one off, just because, man, this was like practice for me. I don't really play very much Pyro, as you can imagine. I've tried to get a little bit more of a handle on the whole Pyro aspect by learning how to reflect things now and then, and usually you don't get opportunities like you're seeing right now. Look at two soldiers firing rockets in this general direction, and you've got like a heavy and a medic on the point, and I'm really surprised I didn't die right there. And that's probably because I could air blast, and even if I couldn't air blast, if I were even using the flog, then I could probably just dodge those rockets, no problem. But I'm not using the phlogistonator. I have not touched that weapon for the longest time, even after the Tough Break update gave it those very odd changes. I don't really know if I'm supposed to call it a nerf or a buff, because it's very ambiguous, according to a lot of people, but we'll talk about that weapon when I actually bother to play with it. So, seeing as how I am equipping the Degreaser for today, the beauty of it being that you can just air blast somebody into the air and then kill them using your secondary weapon. So, the Degreaser. I've talked about this weapon a few videos ago when the Tough Break update initially came to be, and it still continues to be my favorite flamethrower of all time, and that's probably due to the fact that I cannot seem to get out of the habit of using the Degreaser as if I would use other flamethrowers. So if I, in any instance, attempt to equip something like the stock flamethrower, or even the backburner, I have a tendency to try air blasting someone into the air, and then immediately switching to my secondary weapon in order to finish them off. It's just a force of habit that I've unfortunately developed, so I figured, why not just stick with the weapon that gave me this habit to begin with? The Degreaser has certainly been the most popular flamethrower in Team Fortress 2, and probably one of the more controversial ones, just due to the fact that it had very fast weapon switch and it enabled you to get instant crits with the flare gun. So, let's talk a little bit about the changes that they made to it, again, because, you know, I've got this very long video, I might as well talk about it. The Degreaser no longer consumes 20 ammo whenever you air blast with it. It consumes 25, so in total you can only air blast 8 times. So now there's a different amount of ammo distribution when it comes to each flamethrower, when it comes to air blasting at least. So 10 times with the stock flamethrower, 8 times with the Degreaser, and 4 times with the backburner. I do kind of like that. I kind of like how it was changed so that way you can't just abuse the air blast with trapping someone into a corner. Now you have to be slightly more tactical because you need to know where the ammo kits are, and you also need to be aware of when the engineers actually need the ammo or if someone else needs the ammo. So I think it's pretty interesting. Now the afterburn damage has also been severely nerfed, as now it only deals 1 point of damage at a time, so a medic can practically out-regenerate health over a pyro's afterburn damage with this weapon. And the weapon switching time has also been a little bit changed. I think the switch to speed was sort of kept the same, but the switch away speed might have been slightly lowered, so now you can't exactly abuse the weapon switching speed too much as if you could with the old Degreaser. But you know what, I'm actually really comfortable with this change. I just find it a little bit easier now because the reaction time you needed when you switched weapons before was a little bit weird with me and the flare gun. The flare gun and I have never exactly been the best of friends. I've used it plenty of times, but sometimes my aim is just awful. Just to give you a little bit of background information as to how embarrassingly awful my aim was when switching immediately to a flare gun after comboing someone with the Degreaser's air blast. Let's say I was just going up against a guy, and then I would immediately air blast him, switch to the flare gun in order to get that instant crit, but I would have a tendency to keep moving, and I would probably not anticipate how fast I could actually switch to the flare gun, and I would usually just miss my shot, and the flare would just fly 2 feet past somebody's head. I don't know what it was about that. Maybe I was just not adjusted to the Degreaser's weapon switching speed yet, but everything about it feels a little more fluid now. And even with the slight increase in the air blast ammo consumption rate, I still can't complain about it. I think it's pretty decently balanced now, and it still continues to be my favorite flamethrower just because of all the creative methods you can use to kill people. It doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, I'm going to run at this person spraying flames for all eternity and maybe eventually I'll kill them. It doesn't have to be that mindless, and I like having those options. So in a most appropriate fashion, if the Degreaser was my go-to weapon for Pyro, then the flare gun would usually follow suit, because it's a combination that just makes sense. You air blast someone into the air, if it wasn't a Pyro anyway, and you immediately crit them with a flare. Now, let's talk a bit about the shotgun, and at the same time I'm gonna go on a very small rant about Demo Knight right here. Demo Knight has been one of my favorite playstyles, and prior to this update, Demo Man with the charge and charge, you could just not really do much against them with the flamethrower or the flare gun. But a lot of people seem to forget that the Pyro had a shotgun, which was really the best counter to a Demo Knight. Pyros having that one weakness against Demo Knights made them a lot more interesting, because then you had to assume, well, if these Demo Knights are going to be equipping grenade launchers, then the most I can do is just air blast these grenades away. Or you could equip a shotgun and you'd have a slight upper hand in this situation, because the flare gun doesn't necessarily have to be the superior option. The shotgun is a pellet spraying device that can deal up to 90 damage at point blank range. It's a very efficient weapon, and it can do pretty much the same things that the flare gun can do if you have a pretty good aim. And plus, having those extra shots in the shotgun's clip is just as important, really. So, in the end, I think the shotgun is a very good alternative, but now that the Tough Break update has passed and Demo Knights with the charge and charge no longer have fire immunity, Pyros are seemingly able to just instantly thrive nowadays in the battlefield, just being able to spray flames constantly, and you can get those crits of the flare gun. It may deal slightly less damage, but in the end it doesn't matter. Demo Knight has just been significantly butchered in my opinion, and we'll rant about that some other time. Instead, I'm just showing off a couple of in-between clips before we get to the serious business of the next round. Look at me just waiting for that Uber to end and then getting backstabbed immediately. And I'm trying desperately to apply the extinguisher against these people too, but as you can see, it's not exactly working out. A huge weakness of the extinguisher comes from the fact that you can realistically only pair it with the Degreaser if you want it to have any sort of effect against the people you're fighting, and even then, it still takes about a second to switch to the weapon, and by the time you finish, well, there's probably different means you could have accomplished at killing that person. Maybe the person's already dead, or maybe that person has finally found a way to combat you now that you're not aimlessly running at them with a flamethrower, or trying to combo them with a shotgun or a flare gun or anything like that. Now, there are two things I actually find agreeable with the extinguisher's changes now. Prior to this update, and even before that, let's go into a little bit of a ramble right here about what I thought of the very first extinguisher, because I played Pyro a bit of a decent amount. He's not been one of my more played classes, but I'm trying to get used to him now. When I first took a look at actually playing in the hands of the Pyromaniac, I looked at the extinguisher and I perceived it to be pretty reasonably balanced. If it by default did less damage, then one would naturally assume that its crit damage would also be less than 195, but that was not the case. So when I saw the amount of damage I could do with the extinguisher, I thought, this is the most mindless weapon ever. I mean, oh man, it takes so much effort to walk up to somebody, spray them with flames, and immediately switch to the extinguisher in less than a second, dealing 195 damage. Oh, going against a heavy? Oh, it takes so much effort to swing at a heavy 2 times after spraying them with flames. you could cut the sarcasm with a bloody knife here. I just thought the extinguisher was a really pathetically easy weapon before. Now, the changes made to it certainly didn't help. You had to treat it as if you were playing Spy Pyro, or Spyro if you want to be clever about this, because dealing 195 damage was only possible if you approached them from behind. And then you had to take a look at its regular damage, which was just a mini crit version of the axe if you set someone on fire. And that was about it. Let's carefully observe the damage that the extinguisher is capable of outputting now when it comes to critical hits. I find this the most balanced because I've always looked at the extinguisher as if it were a weapon that's capable of finishing people off. Remember that 130 damage can instantly kill any weak class, and it's very close to instantly killing medics, so with that in mind, let's pay close attention to how the extinguisher is now and how it could possibly be changed. 130 damage, you still have to put a bit of effort to actually kill other classes, some of the more tougher ones. This lower swing rate I find very reasonable, because again, boiling down to the argument that this is a weapon that should only finish people off, you should not be able to just switch weapons immediately and abuse the hell out of it. And, well, its slower switching speed, I find it disagreeable, but I don't think you should get rid of it entirely. I think you should maybe have the slower weapon switch speed which it currently possesses. It would at least make it a little more functional with any flamethrower that wasn't the Degreaser. And, well, that's really only a theory. I would love it if they had actually just kept the TF2's open beta, so that way maybe the community could test this stuff out before Valve decided to change it, but that's merely only a dream. So, really, the only change I could really recommend for the extinguisher would just be to have the slower weapon switch speed which it currently possesses, not rid of it entirely so it can't be abused, and then I think it would be fine-tuned to the point of being a good side grade and not a direct upgrade to the fire axe. Even though most people don't use the fire axe ever, because when are you ever going to use melee as a pyro, right? Well, clearly, the game has found ways to convince you to use melee weapons. Extinguisher, power jack, even the garden rake in some cases. And there is one more thing I need to note about the extinguisher and its potential changes in the future. And I've kind of had a little bit of an argument with a friend over this. Magus the Bonehead and I have talked about the extinguisher before, and he has different thoughts on this weapon. He believes, for example, that the extinguisher should be changed back to its roots. Go back to the way it was originally, capable of dealing 195 damage to anything that's on fire, and, you know, it'll be good. But the one thing he wants to change in regards to that would be, anytime you hit someone with this weapon, it would actually extinguish them, so thus it would live up to the pun which it currently holds. I only find this disagreeable because it's 195 damage and I still think it's incredibly absurd, but we kind of debated about this already, and whichever one you find more agreeable, you know, tell me in the comments if you'd like, or if you have any potential changes that you would personally make to it. I would love to hear it, because Pyro is just the most controversial thing in TF2. Really, everybody talks about the Pyro. It's just one of the biggest things that you could complain about, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. So, I think we can move on from this subject, and maybe talk a bit about the flare gun which I'm using right now. The flare gun is incredibly powerful, incredibly strong. I can't think of many ways I would actually change it if I so desperately wanted to, if I had the opportunity. I think part of the problem I only have with the flare gun now is only because of the fact that Demo Knight was nerfed. Again, I could probably save this rant for a video where I actually played Demo Knight. I just thought it was more interesting that Demo Knight actually had a strength against Pyromaniacs. You were getting rid of a sticky bomb launcher in order to have a shield equipped. And, well, what was interesting is that since you had the charge in charge, you couldn't suffer from afterburn penalty. But again, like, Demo Knights didn't have bullet resistance ever. They don't need bullet resistance, and bullets are some of the biggest threats to anyone in TF2. Scout has always been a counter to Demo Man, and even to some extent to Demo Knight if you were careful with your footing and you stayed away outside of his sword range. And Pyro, well, it's pretty much the same thing. You have a 6-shot shotgun. All it really takes is a little bit of practice with the shotgun, and there you go, you can kill that Demo Knight no problem. But as you can plainly see, I just fought a charge and charge Demo Knight, and I attacked him with the extinguisher. I could have used the flare gun, but who gives a crap at this point? Really, I just think that Demo Knight needs to be re-evaluated. Another thing that I wish could happen, but probably will never be, in the end, because Valve is Valve, and changes are for people who own the game, and they don't have the open beta available for anyone in the public because it's just not a thing anymore. I can rant about this all day. The way it stands right now, the flare gun, I can't think of any changes I would make to this weapon. I would only think about changing the Demo Knight, and that's really about it. So this gameplay, you've probably saw so far, we got pushed back to the final point earlier, and it's been a bit of a struggle getting back, but thankfully we had the power and the strength, and one of the best scouts wearing a banana hat to help us. So, with that all in mind, I was making a few mistakes earlier. We were getting incredibly crushed, and I was making a lot of illogical decisions in the fights I was participating in, so switching over to the flare gun actually did help because I was able to get those on-demand 90 damage crits. And now we're just going to go ahead and storm their next point. It's been a bit of an interesting match so far, and one of the reasons why I enjoyed it so much is just because, again, lots of reflect practice that I could get against many of the soldiers that were fighting us. It was pretty silly. And there's a Huntsman sniper on that roof up there. I'm trying to reflect his arrows, but I get Uber. This medic was a very important asset to the team. So thank you very much, medic, if you are listening to this video, in the very unlikely chance that you are. That Uber pretty much saved my life. And that Uber probably would have been good in this situation too, where I decide to encounter this Pyro who also had a medic. And it's good to air blast your medics frequently. Make sure they stay alive. Make sure they get all the health kits. But in the end, we win because the scout manages to backcap this. And that's going to conclude this gameplay. So thank you guys very much for watching. Have a great day or evening. And I guess I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.